The key to Boston College in 2025 isn't the offense or the defense. It's limiting mental mistakes.
You are Locked On Boston College, your daily podcast on the Boston College Eagles. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. This is Locked On Boston College, your team every day. I'm your host, AJ Black of Eagle Insider, part of the 247 Network. I've been covering Boston College for over a decade. If you're looking for Boston College news, analysis, and scoops, you're in the right place. Locked On Boston College is a free daily Boston College podcast available on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. On today's show, we're going to talk about the Big Ten playoff model and why I'm intrigued by it, and I'll explain why. Getting back to full strength, BC looks like they're getting their depth back, and I'll explain what that means. And let's kick it off by talking about something Bill O'Brien talked about during Tuesday's press conference, mental mistakes. So to kick this off, Bill O'Brien talked about last season and what BC needs to do this season to take that next step. How do they get past the 7-win mark? How do they win more games? And one of the big keys that Bill O'Brien said during his press conference was, we have to eliminate sloppy football. We have to eliminate mistakes because that killed us last year. There was too much sloppy football. There were too many mental mistakes. And I think that is absolutely 100% true because look at the games Boston College lost last year. What happened during those games? You go from the Virginia game, which was just a comedy of errors, of turnovers and bad football and, penalties and all sorts of mistakes that just ended up killing them. They were a better team than Virginia, but they didn't play that way, and that cost them. Against Virginia Tech, it was mental mistakes again. It was 2 fumbles by Tommy Castellanos at the goal line. It was mistakes down a penalty late. I think it was a penalty later in the game that forced them into a bad field goal position. Against SMU, you would have won that game if Grayson James didn't throw that back-breaking interception before halftime. I could go on and on. The margin for victory for Boston College in most games is always razor thin. That's what happens when you don't have blue chip recruits on your team. That's what happens when you're playing with a recruiting class that's in the 60s. You have to outbeat them on the field with your brain. A lot of times you have your athleticism, but the brain is what's going to have to beat them. So I look at what's going to have to happen. What does he mean by that? Mental mistakes. It goes back to his motto. You need to be 1% better every time. This is something else he brought up on Tuesday. People asked him, what does that mean? Where did it come from? And the players have been saying, it's to stack days, get better at one little thing each day. And then by the end of 10 days, you're 10% better than you were last week. That motto for players that you're trying to develop when you're a developmental program is a wise one. Because that's what that's what this coaching staff is about. You're not bringing in guys that are elite athletes, that are elite football players coming out of thoroughbred high schools and are going to blow the doors off with just their raw athleticism. These are guys you need to teach and develop. And how do you do that? By coaching, good coaching. So it sounds like O'Brien was not happy with some of the ways things turned out last year, and I don't blame him. Those losses, every single one of those could have been a win. Even the Virginia Tech game, if a few things tweaked there, you could have won that game. Virginia, you absolutely could have won that game. Louisville, you should have won that game. In SMU, you were right there. Nebraska, I'm not going to get into the Nebraska loss because I just look at that one and say, there was a lot of weird stuff, and it was a weird bowl game. So that one's not in there. And then there's Missouri. Missouri, you were right there too. And, I think there were just, your offense was not able to do what it needed to do. He's going to probably call that mistakes and just not being able to execute. You got to fix it. So this year, what will make that better? Well, first of all, you obviously have an upgrade at quarterback. You haven't watched him yet, but one of the big keys to Dylan Larnigan is what's between his ears. He is, I think Graham Dietz of SI on SI had a really good article where he talked to Larnigan's offensive coordinator in high school, and he said, this is a kid that is really good at analyzing and breaking down things quickly. That hopefully will prevent mental mistakes. Because Tommy Castellanos, he had the athleticism, but his decision making at times was terrible. Grayson James, better, definitely better. But I don't think it's going to be as good as what Dylan Larnach is going to be able to do. And then you look at the defensive side of the ball. You have a lot of returning guys that are either returning to you or just have a lot of experience. Your whole secondary, whether it's Amari Jackson, KP Price, Carter Davis, these guys have all played a lot. They're good players. They're going to minimize mistakes. One thing that I have rarely seen during camp, I can tell you this, is blown coverages. I've seen it maybe once or not once or twice, but only a handful of times. How often did that happen under Jeff Hafley? It happened all the time, and he was the defensive guru. That's a mental mistake right there, and that's things they can prevent. Penalties are another thing they can prevent. BC was in the top 15 last year in penalties after being 100 and something the year before. That is a mental mistake. Putting yourself behind the sticks is something BC can ill afford if Bill O'Brien wants them to have that mental acuity. And that's why you're watching when I'm watching these practices, guys make a penalty and the coaches they let them hear about it. How, this is not acceptable. So they are getting drilled false starts, holding, things like that, things that you can prevent. You can't do it when you're Boston College. You just cannot. You have to be able to limit those and do what you did last year. And then the final mental mistake has got to be special teams. I'm watching punting, right? Right now during camp, and I've written it on an Eagle Insider. Every single practice, and I'm not saying this to say that their punting is going to be excellent because I'll get to that in a second. They have both Seamus Florio and Andy Quinn are 1,000 times better than what we had last year. Just booming punts. But does that make me feel like it's going to happen during the game? No, because there's still a mental component to punting in front of 40,000 people. And I haven't been able to see them do that yet. So if they have a mental slip up there and all of a sudden all this great work that I've seen during camp goes out the window, boom, you're right back to where you were last year. They cannot have that. The mental toughness there, the mental, the ability to get yourself to where you need to be in terms of punting, 40 plus yards every time. A lot of it's up here. A lot of those shanks last year, I believe, were not a physical thing. I think it was it was the yips, kind of like if you watch, baseball and things like that. This was the very similar version of the yips, but for punting. That's a mental thing. So you see, there's physical stuff. There's injuries, there's all that kind of stuff, and there's better athletes that you're going to play that's going to make it harder. But there's also that mental component. And BC has to be at the top of their game to win with that piece. And they can. They have a smart coaching staff, and they have a good group of players that hopefully can execute what they're being taught. In a moment, back to practice. Some good news, and I'll explain what that all is in just a moment. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the daily fantasy platform that lets you turn your football predictions into real rewards. Preseason is already heating up, and college football isn't far behind. Whether you got your eye on big-name quarterbacks or breakout running backs, Prize Picks makes it easy to get in the game. I've told you, I'm really looking forward to see what Drake May can do, but also I want to look at what Joe Burrows has. I always feel like he's a guy that's going to have a high number, so maybe I could do with both. All you have to do is pick more or less on 2 to 6 player stat projections. If you get your picks right, you can cash in and win up to 2,000 times your money. I've used Prize Picks for a few seasons now myself, and I love how simple it is. It's as easy as brewing a cup of coffee for me. I can get in, boom, boom, boom. By the time my coffee cup is done, I got my lineup for the day. With PrizePick, they put their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. So download the PrizePick app today and use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That's code LOCKEDONCollege to get $50 in lineups after your first $5 play. PrizePicks, run your game. If you're trying to stay on top of your routine, whether that's workouts, long days on campus, or staying focused through back-to-back classes, hydration is where it all starts, and that's where Drip Drop comes in. Drip Drop is a doctor-approved and scientifically proven for fast hydration. It uses the perfect balance of sodium electrolytes and glucose to help your body absorb fluids quickly, delivering 3 times the electrolytes and half the sugar of a leading sports drink. Now, I love their orange flavor. I use that every day at practice. When I'm there, I'm not working as hard as some of those athletes out there, but it's still hot. And I want to make sure that I'm staying hydrated and getting the best hydration that I can. So I have my bottle and I fill it with Drip Drop every single practice. I have my bottle and it helps me get through some of those hot summer days on campus. Right now, Drip Drop is offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first order. Just head to dripdrop.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCollege. This is Locked On Boston College, AJ Black of Eagle Insider. And for everyone who has made Locked On Boston College your first listen every day, you know that we've been talking a little bit about guys that haven't been playing in some of the practices. And that's just part of the grind of college camps, and football camps in general. You're playing a physical sport 5 days a week, sometimes 6 days a week out there. And there's going to be times where you're going to get rolled on, you're going to get hit hard, you're going to just get sore, and there's going to be days they're going to be needing off. Going into the second scrimmage that we talked about yesterday with Mike Sidley, if you haven't checked that out, go back to our archives and listen to that episode. We discussed that there was some players that had been missing. And it was starting to really pile up. And Bill O'Brien had been mentioning that, he's really good about mentioning that there's guys that are out. We know that players like Jalen Blackwell and Jonathan Montague, they're out for a while. They're not going to be back for a while. Shaker Isaac still has not returned back, quarterback, freshman. But there were players from practices that just it seemed like it was piling up. In the last week, I don't know if they were hurt or if it was maintenance days. I can't speculate on that. But some of the guys we did know about. Reed Harris, he was dealing with an ankle injury. Turbo Richard, I think he said it was a cut on his hand. I don't know what that means. There was a cut on his hands. He's been out. We had seen Jude Bowery out for a while, and Dwayne Alec. So we didn't know, how severe these injuries. They're going to keep that close to the vest, and so there's still concern. Depth, as Bill O'Brien has said, was starting to become an issue at some of their positions. Defensive line, for instance, they were worried about that. They were, sometimes I was out there and they were playing guys like Michael Bumpus at defensive line. And you're really getting deep into that depth chart. So on Tuesday, practice happens. And the biggest thing, I've watched so much 7-on-7 and 11-on-11 practice. It kind of makes your eyes glaze after a while. But I was watching to see who's coming back because we're now just 4 days away from the start of game prep for Fordham. And I was curious, A, who would be back, and B, if they would take their time, because you can go without some of these guys if you need to against Fordham and just give another week. But I was relieved to see so many of those guys back. Here were all the players that I saw that have been out for a while back. Jude Bowery, huge sigh of relief right there. If there's any player on this team that is indispensable, it's Jude Bowery, your starting left tackle. This guy needs to stay healthy, and to have him back was enormous. And equally as big, Dwayne Alec was back at practice. Hadn't seen him practicing in a while either. So you have, as Bill O'Brien had said, you have most of your starting lineup there. Your starting offensive linemen, Eric Stoggerty, Kevin Klein, Jude Bowery, Dwayne Alec, and Logan Taylor. That's the 5 he said on John Meter Perel's show. So you're back to what looks like full strength there. Now there's still, he mentioned Michael Krauntz potentially as center, but we'll have to wait to see where that kind of falls. Additionally back, Reed Harris. Reed Harris was everywhere on Tuesday. He looked as good as you'd expect. He had one pass. This is the Reed Harris that I think you guys all love. They were doing red zone play, and I forget if it was Larnigan or Grayson James. Through him, he had Isaiah Ferris, who's all of 5'10", on him. And James or Larnigan threw him a jump ball that poor Isaiah Ferris had no chance of stopping. And Reed Harris just took those long arms up and grabbed it for a touchdown. Haven't seen that in a while. That was good to see. So they're back. Ty Clemens, who had been sitting for a while, he is back. Up and down, the only one still out is Turbo. Turbo's the big one that's still sitting out. But if it's really just a cut hand, that seems like the least of their worries. Like that's something I am assuming they're just letting it heal and then he'll be back. So that's a good sign right there. I think right now they got through. There's only a few more practices left. They're done with scrimmages, I believe. They got through the grinding part of camp when it was 90 degrees and there's just guys hitting the same guys over and over and over again. They've only got like 3 practices left. They're right there, and they're gonna hopefully get through this without any major disasters. You lost Owen Stodmeyer, and we don't know what's going on there. That's still a tough loss, but look at what some of these other schools are dealing with. Texas Tech just lost, their starting running back, the star transfer they got from USC. He's gone for the year with a knee injury. Andrew Babalola, who is like a top 10 recruit in the country, who was projected to be Michigan's starting tackle, he's gone for the year with some sort of injury. So, grand scheme of things, hopefully they're going to make it through the rest of these couple practices and be able to hang their hat on that this team is pretty healthy. Your quarterbacks are looking good. I think Bill has done a really good job during camp of balancing the needs of his players and still being physical. Because when Wednesday hits, they're going back. Today was in shells. They were in shells today. They're going to be back in full pads tomorrow. So they're going to be hitting again. And so hopefully, they've only got that one and Thursday and Saturday, I think, for practices. And then it's prep week. We're almost here, folks. Saturday is the start of week 0. I'm as pumped as you are to be hearing about that. So it's a big week, and camp. I think everyone's starting to get ready. I think it's the end is in sight. We're almost there, and you're going to start seeing these players getting really ready to win. Now, in a moment, I want to discuss with you the Big Ten's playoff model. This was a crazy news item that came up this weekend. I got some people up in a tizzy, but I'll explain you what I think about it in just a moment. If you're running a business, every missed call is money left on the table. Think about the last time you needed a service. If the first person didn't answer, did you wait? Probably not. You moved on. That's why you need Open Phone, so you never miss an opportunity to connect with your customers. Open Phone is the #1 business phone system designed to streamline and scale your customers' communications. I juggle 2 phones all the time. I have 2 numbers, one for recruiting work, one for my life in general. And it's difficult, but Open Phone solves that instantly. Your whole team can share one number and respond to customers like a shared inbox. No more, who's handling this? And so while you can see over 60,000 businesses trust Open Phone. It's a great system for anyone that needs it. They're offering Locked On listeners 20% off your first 6 months at openphone.com/lockedoncollege. That's openphone.com/lockedoncollege. They'll even port over your existing numbers for free. Open Phone. No missed calls, no missed customers. Wrapping things up, this is Locked On Boston College. I'm your host, AJ Black. And if you're looking for a second listen, if this is your first listen, your second listen should be Locked On ACC. We're going to have a great roundtable episode coming out later this week on season predictions, and I'll be on that one this time. So check that out on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. So let's put the camp to the side for a moment and talk some national news. Now, college football has changed their playoff model multiple times over the last couple of years. First, it was 4 teams, then it was 8, then it's 12, and it's just rising and rising and rising. Now, the Big Ten has been kind of the outlier in terms of how they view what they want in the college football playoffs. They want more automatic bids for each conference, the 2 big ones, especially SEC and Big Ten, and then everyone else gets kind of the scraps for at-larges, basically. But over the weekend, a new radical proposal proposed a 28-team playoff model. And before you laugh it down and say, wow, that's watering down college football, and I get it, part of it would also be the elimination. If you were to build this, it would immediately eliminate conference championship games. So if you're really into conference championship games, if that's like your jam, if you like those, you'll be bummed because that means they're gone. But it would open the door for a lot more teams. Now, from a Boston College perspective here, this would allow, according to the proposal, it would give 5 spots to the ACC. And I think it was 7 or 8 for the SEC in the Big Ten, and then 5 for the Big 12 and the rest are at large. So what would that mean for BC? I mean, 5? That would be great. If Bill O'Brien can get BC to a top 25 team, like they used to be under Tom O'Brien, that would mean you'd be a playoff team almost every other year. I know it's a different playoff system than it would be if you made it to the top 4 or the top 12. But if you want to be a part of this, if you want to be, to see your team actually make the playoffs, this might be the best chance for BC because you got to be honest with yourself. You got to tell yourself, like, unless something drastically changes under Jack Butler as a new president in terms of money, the money that they're putting into their NIL pool and things like that, nothing's going to change. Nothing is going to get you to that next level because there's too many blue chip schools out there that are going to outpay you and make it easier for them to make it to that point. You'd have to have a miracle year for that to happen. But if the ACC gets 5, what was BC 7th last year? And it was a bad year for them. Now, I know it's watering down the pool. It's watering down the talent and everything like that. It's also, more participation trophies or whatever you want to call it. But, I think college football is changing. And this wouldn't be the worst thing for a school like BC. Now, they say 5 right now, but very soon that will change if that was the case. But to wrap that up, it seems like a lot of ADs and conference commissioners are pretty upset that this news leaked because A, many of them have never even heard of it, and B, that it was just leaked to the media, which sometimes that kind of stuff is just leaked to the media because it's a way to gauge how people react to it, which was not positive. Except for me, covering a team that would need something like that. So what should the playoff system be like? I wish, I think 16, 12 to 16 seems like the money number. And honestly, 12 to 16, if the ACC gets 4, still with a good BC season could mean it. Like if you go back to 2007, BC would have made it. 2008, BC would have made it. Yes, since then, they probably would have never made it. But if you're hoping and you really do believe that Bill O'Brien is going to make this team much more competitive, then they'll be in the mix for this kind of stuff. So 12 to 16 with the ACC getting 4, that would be the best scenario. Will that happen? We'll have to wait to see. It seems like there's a lot of moving puzzles and a lot of moving pieces in college football right now. And that would be one of them. So on tomorrow's show, we are now a couple days away from actually starting our Fordham prep week, which probably won't have a lot to do with prepping Fordham, but we'll be getting into everything going into it, whether it's the depth chart, news items from the week, the injury reports, which we get this year. This is the first year there's going to be actual availability reports. That's new. We'll have all of that next week. We have a few more shows this week. We'll be talking about everything, on these last couple practices. I'll be at practice tomorrow, and then we'll have a few more shows to really wrap up the summer. And then college football's here. Yes. So if you like this, please follow along on YouTube or wherever you get your podcast. Follow me on Twitter at AJBlack247. You can also check me out on Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Did I say Blue Sky? I forget. I'm in all these things. I spend too much time putting stuff on social media. I said all these. What am I doing? So just check me out. Either Eagle Insider or AJ Black or Locked On BC. I'm available on all of those. Thank you all for following along. And actually, I need to shout out the trivia question person. I keep forgetting to do this. I'm doing a terrible job with answering that question. And the last question was, Colin Kaepernick beat Boston College in the Kraft Fight Hunger Bowl in 2011. That was the future NFL quarterback. And I want to shout out Dennis Monahan and Chuck Bianco, who both got that question right. And I want to ask some more questions. I got another one here for you. 2008 was a historic year for BC as they made their second straight ACC title game. Who were the two quarterbacks that really were the biggest, were the two starting quarterbacks during that season? Who were the two? One of them started in the bowl game against Vanderbilt. And another one started the season off. Who were those two quarterbacks? Leave those in the comments section and I'll shout you out if you're correct. Thank you all. This is Locked On Boston College. You can follow me on YouTube, all those places, and check out us here at Locked On Boston College, your team every day.